Welcome to the On List. On today's episode of the On List, I figured I would do a equal polar opposite knee-jerk reaction away from my previous video, which was talking about a fairly vintage women's market fragrance from Christian Dior called Diorella. On this episode, let's go 180 degrees in the opposite direction and talk about Bloo Jooses. Yeah, that's right, I said it, Bloo Jooses. So, what are Bloo Jooses exactly? Well, it's the term that's commonly, pardon me there, it's the term that's commonly applied to most men's fragrances that come in a blue bottle these days. Back in the day when I was first coming up and testing out my first fragrances, we called those aquatics. But not every aquatic came in a blue bottle either, though. I mean, Acqua di Gio didn't come in a blue bottle, for example. But, you know, that's just how things go with the mass appeal market. Things get more and more generalized, more and more based on marketing demographics. Any real attachment to reality, to the physical earth, to materials, gets lost as things become slowly more plasticine and homologated and homogenized in time. So it doesn't really surprise me that something that was maybe once considered citrus aromatic, or, you know, something that had a base in reality, would eventually evolve into the aquatic, which is still has some tangent in reality. I mean, aquatic is a reference to water, right? And then as time would continue and perfumery would continue to get more abstract and materials more synthetic in nature, we would move into what I call the post-aquatic era, which is, you know, it still comes in a blue bottle. It's still designed to smell fresh and clean, but now they've gotten so lazy with it that they don't even bother having an association that a person can like relate to. So you end up with stuff like Invictus and Sauvage, where it's just, what do those terms mean? What does Invictus mean? What does Sauvage mean? I mean, we know what Sauvage means, wild, okay? Invictus, it's Latin. I get it, guys, I do. But that's just it. Blue. They come in a blue bottle. They smell fresh. They smell clean. Sometimes they have either vestiges of aquatic material still used in the composition, or they'll have more of a woody amber feel in the base in place of a more traditional oak moss structure, or like a holdover from the chypre, basically, since oak moss is now pretty much extinct in mass market perfumery due to regulations coming down the pipe from the EU, the Cosmetics Regulatory Board, which then those regulations get passed on to IFRA, and IFRA has to kind of adopt them or die. So then IFRA adopts the regulations too, and that means no more oak moss, no more, most recently, no more Leerol, stuff like that. So that leaves us with the problem of trying to make perfumes smell like something real, but not having access to the materials that the human brain would say, hey, this smells like X, Y, Z. We don't have access to those things anymore unless you're, you know, a perfumer operating out of a country that's outside the purview of the EU, so like Canada, the United States, Mexico. Those places are only beholden to their local regulations. So the FDA, for example, in the US, fairly lax in regulations compared to the EU. So yeah, you could be an artisanal perfumer and continue to use oak moss to your heart's content if you're operating out of the US, but now you can't legally sell your stuff to any European countries within the EU, right? You can smuggle it, I guess. So all of this is kind of like a domino effect, really. And it leads us to the Bloo Jooses. I mean, it's not the only reaction to this phenomenon that we've experienced. There's a lot of things going on: men's market, women's market, unisex market. This video, though, is about the Bloo Jooses. So what do I think of the Bloo Jooses? Well, I like them. I own a fair number of them, so I'd hope I like them, right? Either that or I'm completely delusional. People who follow me on Base Notes and The only way you can access my profile, my wardrobe, is to have an account on Base Notes. So you can't spider crawl me anonymously. I don't have those settings disabled for you guys. So, you know, if you follow me on Base Notes or are at least a member of Base Notes, you can see what I own. My wardrobe is all listed there, all of it. You'll know I own all of the garden variety, Bleu de Chanel, Sauvage, Y, Invictus. You know, I don't have every single entry in this genre. I mean, I've got Versace, Blue, and Versace, Bleu and Blue, Versace, Pour Homme, Dylan Blue. There you go. Finally got it out of my system. That one's a bit of a tongue twister, though, isn't it? Versace, Pour Homme, Dylan Blue. Most folks just call it Dylan Blue. They don't bother saying what it's a flanker to. I mean, Versace, Pour Homme and Versace, Pour Homme, Dylan Blue are kind of such worlds away from each other anyway, that it's almost like it's just a flanker by merit of it being in the same bottle at this point. They don't smell alike at all. So, Bloo Joos. Bloo Joos. Getting back on track here. What do I think of them? I see them as an inevitability, first of all. I see where the general mainstream market, the designer market, the big cosmetic corp brand market, the licensees, Coty, so on and so forth. I've seen where that they've gone with the blue fragrances on the men's side of the fragrance counter as an inevitability, because that's what happens when you race to the bottom, right? When you are controlled by these multi-billion-dollar corporate entities which are publicly traded, and the majority of the stock in these companies is owned by a small gaggle of very rich, very detached, the ghouls, as I call them. You know, they're basically inhuman at this point. They only exist to enrich themselves further and live a life of ambrosia, nectar, and togas and Mount Olympus, gods among men, which in this case translates to Bugattis and mega yachts and caviar dinners 7 nights a week, stuff like that. So they have no real sense of reality anyway, so they don't care. As long as their bank account number keeps getting bigger, that's all that matters. Just infinite growth, untenable, planet-destroying infinite growth. So that kind of race to the bottom mentality is going to cause stuff like the Bloo Joos to come about. You know, when the marketing data and the AI number crunchers and the bean counters say that, well, you know, if we mix this with this and remove this and you know, generalize this, then we can cast an even wider net and bring in an even larger group of potential buyers. And, you know, we can charge the same price for a cheaper product, or in some cases charge more for cheaper product, because the prices keep going up on these things too every year. It seems like the whole Creed model of precipitous yearly price increases has finally found its way to the rest of the fragrance market now. You know, I've made comments on my Chanel video about how the fragrances have gone up about almost 50% from what they were 3 years ago. They were like just under $100 a bottle for the base eau de toilettes. Now they're at like 125, 130, which, you know, you're starting to breach niche prices at that point. Which, you know, when you have to evaluate that you can get a much more interesting, much higher quality niche fragrance for maybe 20 bucks more than something that's objectively inferior to it and is effectively a marketing exercise with a shiny logo of some designer on the bottle somewhere. You have to really think about what you're getting for what you're paying, right? It's kind of silly. So that said, though, discounters still exist, and even though their prices are not as sweet anymore as they used to be, they're still sweet enough that you can reasonably come across some of these Bloo Joos for a price that won't make you feel like you've been bent over a table without lube. So, which ones do I like? Well, I think the ones that I like the most are the ones that really take the whole anything goes abstraction of the general blue theme and try and do something kind of fun with it, you know, because you can make every single entry in this genre an exercise in perfectly marketed, pleasant wearability, you know, just like the equivalent of elevator music, and a lot of them do that. But then some of them go, hey, we can actually have a little bit of fun with this since there are no rules to this now. We've removed every trace of connection to the human experience we can, and we've gotten it down to just this it's a color now. It's blue, right? So what is blue? Blue can kind of be anything, right? So they take more liberties, and those are more fun to me. And you know, before I get into those, though, I will touch upon the popular ones. Bleu de Chanel 2010. That's kind of the one that really set the stage. I mean, there are other fragrances before Bleu de Chanel that were blue, like Polo Blue, for example. Although people consider that to be an aquatic, and I'm going to stick with that. That's still kind of an aquatic, even though it's more of a salty melon meets leather sage kind of thing. It's not necessarily aquatic. It's aquatic enough, you know. But Bleu de Chanel was the first one that was really like, okay, we have no attachment whatsoever to the aquatic genre. We have no attachment whatsoever to really anything. And when you smell it, you know the history behind Jacques Polge and his work. It kind of regurgitates a little bit of what he did for Salvatore Ferragamo with the Subtil Pour Homme fragrance. It kind of regurgitates Subtil, but then it adds layers to it. It puts a little bit violet in there. It kind of tweaks with the heart notes. It adds more sage and geranium. It kind of builds it up because Subtil was an aquatic, okay? So Bleu de Chanel is not. So it kind of takes that aquatic skeleton and it sort of puts more meat on the bones. And then, you know, you get patchouli and some nice sort of little tiny touch of Noir Limbinol, which gives it a slight sort of incense vibe in the base, a little dry vibe. And, you know, it's a very well-rounded fragrance. Maybe not the most interesting fragrance, but it definitely doesn't make you feel dissatisfied at all. You know, and it comes in a eau de parfum, which is sweeter, and then a parfum, which is woodier. You know, so you've got different options in that. Sauvage is kind of like hilarious to me. A lot of people hate it in the fragrance community, and then a lot of people who are not enthusiasts, who are just average Joe people, like, you know, the guys in the street, they love it. So it's kind of like, it's almost a social experiment, you know. Make a fragrance that is so glaringly harsh and attention-seeking and just imbalanced and loud for the sake of it, you know. And watch all the guys with the popped collars go nuts for it because they're extroverted. They want that attention. They want your phone number. They want to add you to their little list of people they've shagged, right? So it's the fragrance for that guy. And that's not a fragrance that should be mainstream because that guy is still kind of the minority. That, you know, Night the Roxbury dude, that's sort of, he's a joke. He's a pop culture joke, but he's not mainstream. Yet somehow that fragrance did become very, very mainstream. And now we've got an eau de parfum and a parfum and an elixir. And it's funny because Dior has never really capitulated to the lowest common denominator. And they still technically didn't with Sauvage. Sauvage is not designed as a friendly, mass-appealing fragrance, yet it somehow, in spite of itself, became one. So it's a bit of a social experiment in my eyes, and, you know, I wear it for kicks. It's not my favorite fragrance either because it is very loud and irritating. You go nose blind to it super fast, but it's Dior being Dior, effectively, like they've always been, but yet somehow it just blew up. So it's kind of like you can't always predict. You know, you think something more measured like Bleu de Chanel would stay on top, but no. The much louder, more garish Foghorn Sauvage has thoroughly trounced it in sales. Then we've got Y, which is the YSL entry into the blue schema. And the Eau de Toilette was trash. Not Dominique Ropion's finest hour at all. Eau de Parfum is the one I found actually wearable, and I bought that one. It's richer, it's thicker, it's a bit sweeter, but it also has more balance. It balances the sweetness in the apple with like a really sort of harsh mineral ambergris style base accord, which it kind of borrows from Invictus. It just feels like a little bit more mature Invictus in my eyes, which is why I like it, and that's why I own it. Speaking of Invictus, I have that too. Invictus is like the bubblegum shower gel bonanza. It has all that bubblegummy ethyl maltol up top and the juniper berry, and it's got the bay leaf thrown in there for masculinity, and then it goes into the very musky, again, the minerally sort of salty, minerally ambergris, ambroxan powered base there. So it's a contrast, that sweet bubblegum shower gel up top, and then the mineral muskiness and a little bit of the Caribbean twist with the bay in the base. And it's another one of those pop the collars, we're going out tonight kind of fragrances, but yet for some reason it's become very popular to wear just in general. So another one that's sort of a social experiment. It just kind of really shows you what guys are wanting these days, right? Guys want to make you take notice. At least guys who wear fragrance want you to take notice. The whole idea of having a genteel, discreet, daily wear signature, like it's my shaving accoutrement thing, that's dead. Guys don't want that now. Guys want to be like, yeah, man, I'm up in the club, even if they're just at the office. They want to be at the club wherever they are, whether they're at home, in the car, picking up McDonald's, or the office. They want to be in the club always. So the market is catering to that, clearly. Versace Dylan Blue, to me that one's kind of interesting because the Versace Pour Homme Dylan Blue puts a lot of 90s stuff in there. I feel like it remixes a lot of what was in Blue Jeans, which is sort of a musky galbanum laundry materials kind of thing going on there, the lavender. And then they take that 90s blue feeling and then they kind of throw in the modern day fruitiness and the ambroxan and such. So it's kind of like a 90s meets 2010s. And most guys who wear it don't perceive that. They don't. This is strictly me being old and remembering back in the day, right? So I'm making that leap through time, that connection. Not a lot of folks are going to make that connection, but to me, Versace Dylan Blue kind of feels like Blue Jeans Part 2, or like a modernized Blue Jeans. And that's one of the reasons why I like it. And then I can't think of any other contemporary blue fragrances that I really own and enjoy that are mainstream like that. I mean, Avon has one called Avon Free for Him. Comes in a blue bottle. It's like upside down cap kind of thing, a circle with a little square cap. That one's kind of neat because Avon basically took the blue phenomenon and mixed fougere tones into it. So they basically took a look at something like XS Pour Homme or a Creed Himalaya, which is that soapy, sharp, sandalwoody, geranium, metallic kind of 90s, early 2000s fougere, and then dumped blue into it. Dumped the post-aquatic, you know, the ambroxan, all that stuff, and it works actually. It's like a neo bluesier or something, and because it's Avon, no one's going to pay any attention to it. No one's going to buy it. No one's going to sample it. It's not going to be on any other YouTubers' videos anytime soon, unfortunately. So you're probably only going to hear about it from me. And since I've got like hardly any followers at all, that means it's still going to remain thoroughly unknown. But Avon Free for Him, it's pretty interesting. It's one of the more the creative blue experiences because it mixes in some of that 90s fougere into the formula. And then there's Missoni has their Parfum Pour Homme, which is kind of like they kind of went in a similar direction. They went, let's put some 80s into the blue. So they kind of took Dracar Noir and Xerius by Givenchy and stuff like that, Alain Delon Plus, and they mixed some of that stuff, Pancaldi, that whole era of the clean soapy fougere, the patchouli and stuff, and they mixed that in with the blue formula. So it kind of feels like, what if blue fragrances came out 40 years ago? What would we get? And that's kind of what the Missoni is for me personally. So it's thicker and heavier, not the best for use in the summer for that reason. But again, I find it very interesting. So yeah, if you really dig deep, you can find some interesting stuff in this genre. It's not all just drivel. Yeah, a lot of it is drivel. Trust me, a great big heaping pile of it is garbage. You know, Calvin Klein's blue fragrance called Defy, it's garbage, for example. You know, so and Davidoff with their constant flankers to Cool Water. Those are all more or less blue fragrances now too. They're not aquatics anymore, and those are all Garbo too. So there's a lot of blue garbage out there. Make no mistake. You know, there's a lot of blue garbage, and even the niche brands are getting into the blue stuff. House of Sillage has like number 3 or something, and it's like a blue fragrance, and it smells like it should be like $50, but they want like $500 for it, and I'm just like, why? Why? So, you know, that's my thing, is just this whole phenomenon. if you read between the lines, there's some cool stuff in there, but you just have to come to terms with what they are. And continuing to make fun of them or knock them or whatever, you know, it's like, just, there's only so many times you can poke fun at McDonald's for being McDonald's. And after a while, people start looking at you like, you must really have a problem with McDonald's, right? Like, yeah, they're cheap, but the food's not great. It's consistent, but the food's not great. Like, if it's what you want, it's what you're looking for, then that's what you buy, right? So that's the Bloo fragrances, just like the aquatics before them and the fresh fougères before them and all the barbershop stuff and the aromatic fougere stuff before that. There's always been like this trope that becomes the dominant life form, and it's the dominant life form because it's the most mass appealing thing on the market for that target market, which in this case we're speaking about men, right? So the thing that casts the widest net, that speaks to the largest cross-section of men, becomes the dominant life form. And in the 60s, that was stuff like Brut and High Karate. In the 70s, it was stuff like Paco Rabanne and Azaro Porom. In the 80s, it was stuff like Drakkar Noir and Cool Water and Eternity. In the 90s, it was stuff like CK1, Acqua di Gio, Low DC. In the 2000s, you know, it was stuff like Bulgari Aqua, it was stuff like Polo Blue, it was stuff like Dolce & Gabbana Light Blue. And now here we are in the 2010s and 2020s, which I feel like they're kind of one decade. We've never really left the 2010s in terms of perfume. We're 3 years into the 2020s and things still feel like they did in 2013. So maybe we're in for a long haul with these Bloo fragrances, but you know, it's what people want. So you either can find something in that particular section that you find appealing to, like you find some value in there somewhere, or you just leave it alone, you know? So that's kind of how I feel about the Bloo Jooses. I'm just sort of like indifferent about them, and I feel like they have their uses if you have an open enough mind to more mainstream. If you're really super hardcore niche or hardcore vintage or hardcore artisanal stuff, then you really have no business looking at them in the first place. So, you know, if you know it's going to be something that's not going to appeal to you, then looking into it and then finding out that it doesn't appeal to you and then complaining about it just feels like you should really be complaining about yourself and wasting your own time, right? It's like, I know I don't like liver, so I've tried liver, I know I don't like it. I'm not going to go run around eating 15 different liver dishes and then complaining about how bad liver is because I'm the one that made myself eat all 15 of those liver dishes, right? So I'm the idiot here. So that's kind of the point I'm getting at with the Bloo Jooses, man. If you know you don't like them, there's really no use in continuing to run out and sample more of them because you're not going to find one you like. You just aren't. All right, guys, that's my little spiel on the Bloo Jooses, and that's how I feel about them. This has been The Unlist, and have a good one.